We are joined by Philip Munro, who is the Community Outreach Officer of the South Scotland Golden Eagle Project. This talk will provide a brief introduction to the iconic Golden Eagle whilst exploring the background to the project and an update on their progress. I've just got a couple of housekeeping rules before we start. So if you can all mute yourselves and just keep yourselves on mute. Any questions we're going to collect on the chat box and read out at the end. So if you can just keep the chat box to questions, please. And I'm going to hand over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be speaking to you tonight all the way down in Somerset. Most of our work is sort of confined to the south of Scotland regions, the Scottish borders, and Dumfries and Galloway. So it's great to spread the word a bit further. So it's all about this, the golden eagle, or Aquila chrysaetos, to give it its scientific name. I'm going to speak for roughly 3/4 of an hour, and as you just said, I'll start with a bit of background to the golden eagle itself, a bit about its sort of ecology, if you like. I'll go on to give a context to the project, a bit of a background to what we're doing, and then I'll talk about where we've got to in the last sort of 3 years or so. So to start with, just some vital statistics. You could summarise this by saying it's just a really big bird, which it is. It's a little bit smaller than the white-tailed eagle, but not by much, but almost double the size of a buzzard. And I've got a great video towards the end of the presentation which shows them flying together, which is a great comparison. The vast majority of sightings we get reported to us turn out to be buzzards, which you might think is a bit strange given the comparison on this slide, but actually their shape, their markings, it's not too far off, and when you're looking at them from a distance it can be quite difficult, especially when you get small golden eagles and big buzzards. But yeah, we'll look at that a bit later. But yeah, the females are usually, or nearly always, bigger than the males. It's a dimorphism with golden eagles, as there is many different species. So the females up to about 6.6 kilograms compared to the males at 4.5. There's a breeding population of around 500, the vast majority of them up in the north of Scotland. I've got a map showing that later on. And the average age is 23 years, although the oldest known wild golden eagle was a male that died up in Sutherland, up in the north of Scotland, just a couple of years ago. It was 33 years old, so they can reach a fair age. But I suppose, why is it that they're so revered? Why do we have such a fascination with golden eagles? Our culture, our history is sort of steeped with stories about golden eagles and things like that. So why is that? What are some of the characteristics that define them? They're described as being the most elegant of all raptors, with majestic proportions and mastery of soaring or gliding flight, sometimes matched but never surpassed. That image is actually one of our eagles released in 2018. That's Emily. They also have incredible eyesight. So a golden eagle's eyesight is said to be 8 times sharper than that of a human's. They can see their prey moving some 3 kilometers away. They also have a really wide field of vision as well, so they can take in what is ahead of them, what is to the sides of them. So they have this incredible vision. They also have phenomenal strength. Their grip strength through their legs, through their talons, is said to be 10 times stronger than that of a human. So you can understand, when you've got things like the strength, the eyesight, the flight, it's no wonder we have such a fascination with these birds and how they feature so strongly in our sort of culture and our identity. But talking about their talons, use their talons to dispatch their prey. Their prey, or their diet, is incredibly varied. They will take what is sort of local to them, what they can find in their territory. So the collage here represents a study, and it's going quite far back. This was in 1976 to 1983, and it was prey recorded being brought into West Highland eyries, or nests, over 8 breeding seasons. So you can see things in there that you might expect, things like rabbits and hares, perhaps. some corvids, things like that. Some things you might not expect to see, like other raptor species. So you've got buzzards, you've got peregrines, kestrels, hen harriers, and then you've got some quite large prey as well, such as foxes, deer, badgers even. The majority of their diet is carrion. So they're not going to expend all that energy, potential injury, by trying to catch large prey or trying to catch any prey if there's prey that's already died up on the hill, and they can take that. So a lot of their food comes from that, especially things like deer and fox. You'll notice the sheep down in the bottom left-hand corner there. Again, it's carrion. So it's a bit of a misconception sometimes, or a bit of a myth, that people think that eagles go around plucking sheep off hillsides. Which is just not the case. It's very, very rare for a golden eagle to take a healthy lamb. It just very rarely happens. They'll certainly take a dead lamb or a lamb that's been abandoned by its ewe. Yeah, it's interesting to touch on that one. I suppose another thing to say here is just to emphasize how shy golden eagles are, how wary they are of human activity. And that comes into the livestock thing again, where you don't find eagles hunting around human habitation, around farm buildings, or on the outskirts of towns or things like that. They're very much an upland species, very shy, very wary. So sightings are quite uncommon, actually. Talking about their eyries, their nests, these tend to be on craggy hillside ledges, cliff ledges like this one here. They will sometimes build up in trees. They start refreshing their nests, bringing back new material, building them up as early as November in time for the next breeding season. And they'll maintain these eyries over generations. So they can become huge piles if there's the space for them to become bigger. I think the record was up in Scotland again in a Scots pine tree, and it was some 4 meters deep of material that had been stacked up, so they can reach huge proportions. So just running through their sort of breeding behavior, they usually lay 2 eggs. Sometimes they'll just have the one. On rare occasions they might have 3. There was one case of triplets that I know of hatching and all fledging the nest. They're laid between March and April. They incubate for 45 days, and it's the female that incubates for 90% of the time. So we've got the same eyrie here. The chicks usually hatch out in May. They'll take 1.5 days to break their way out. They weigh 100 grams upon hatching. And they'll hatch with a fluffy down, and they'll develop a coarser down before they go on to start to grow their true feathers. And canism, which is essentially one chick killing the other chick, is quite common with golden eagles up to 20 days old. And you'll see in this image here, the chick in the center is hatched first, so it's stronger, it's more alert, it's had food. The chick on the outside, less so. And unfortunately, but it's just a fact of nature that one chick can dominate the other. And I think the next slide shows that. And it's not gruesome, but if you're you don't like looking at things like that as a bit of blood, you might want to look away. But you can see here that the larger chick is just dominating the smaller one, and the parents won't intervene with that. But yeah, it's survival of the fittest, really. So it is quite common for only one chick to fledge a nest with two chicks initially. So this is the same eyrie we're going through here, and this is the surviving chick at 2 weeks old. You can just see the black flecks of true feathers starting to develop there. You can see on its talons there, the talon coming up through the middle is called the hallux, and the talon from the back there. And its crop, which is this sort of bulge at the top of its chest, where it can store food. It's a sort of expandable muscle. Its crop is nice and full, so it's obviously getting a lot of food. So it's a nice healthy chick. And here we are at 4 weeks. So it's now adept at gripping and tearing its own food. You can see more feathers coming through there, and certainly putting on weight and growing. And then we'll jump to 5.5 weeks in just a very short space of time there, 10, 11 days, and it's really sort of rapid growth spurt. And then we get to 7.5 weeks, where it's almost the same size as the adult there. And at this stage, it can keep itself warm, it can thermoregulate. And this is roughly the sort of time that, or age that we will, and I'll come on to talk about this, but that we will collect chicks when they can, feed themselves and keep themselves warm. They're quite robust at this stage. So they'll fledge at around 10 or 11 weeks old. They are supported by the parents once they fledge with food drops. So they'll be keeping an eye on them. They'll still be dropping them food. The chicks will be calling to them for a wee while. They can become independent from as young as 18 weeks old, but it tends to be longer than that. And certainly some will stay for long enough, approaching the next breeding season, where the parents will want to drive them out and free up for the next brood. So as a juvenile, and then known as a sub-adult after a year old, up until about 3 to 5 years old when it matures, it's really all about finding food. It's a really critical time for that young eagle to fend for itself, to find enough food to sustain itself. It's honing its hunting skills. It's looking for carrion. It's exploring far and wide. They don't tend to stay in small areas. They will go from coast to coast, north to south. They will explore large areas. And their plumage changes, and they lose these white patches on their tail and on their wings. And then as an adult, sort of between 3 and 5 years old, they'll sort of mature and look to establish a territory, find a mate. They'll be defending that territory from other eagles, from other raptors. They'll be rearing young. They tend to fail in their first year or two with rearing young. It takes a bit of practice before they successfully rear a chick. But this figure at the bottom here, this 75% mortality rate before maturity, so vast, well, maybe not vast, but a large majority of golden eagles don't survive into adulthood, whether that's perishing in the nest or the first winter or before they mature. They're really up against it, so there's a large proportion of them don't make it. But that was a bit of a rush through sort of eagle biology, ecology. To give you a little, sort of set the scene, if you like, and give a little bit of context to our project, these maps represent a study that was published in 2012. It was looking at the history of eagles across Britain and Ireland, and it was using place names and documentary evidence to sort of plot where eagle territories were. So you'll see the 3 maps there. Map A at the top left is the year 500, map B at the top right is 1800, and map C at the bottom there is 1920. So in the year 500, there was golden eagles all across the south of Scotland there. I should say, sorry, the dark grey represents golden eagles, the light grey is white-tailed eagles, and the black dots are shared airspace, so both white-tailed eagles and golden eagles. So you can see in the year 500, golden eagles all across the south of Scotland, north of England, almost down into the Midlands there, Wales, even down in your neck of the woods in the southwest of England there. White-tailed eagles all over the country. It's quite a big leap forward to map B, 1800, some 1300 years. But you can see that golden eagles and white-tailed eagles have disappeared from England and Wales by then, and certainly far fewer in the south of Scotland. And by the time we get to 1920, white-tailed eagles are extinct from Britain and Ireland, and golden eagles are locally extinct from England, Wales, Ireland, and the south of Scotland. So to bring us up to date, and the map from the RSPB here shows the population as it is today of golden eagles. So you can see there are 2 small patches of green in the south of Scotland there. So there are at the moment 2 to 3 breeding pairs of golden eagles in the south of Scotland. But I should really emphasise how vulnerable, isolated and just small that population is. It's really at risk, hence our project, which I'll come on to. But the return of eagles, golden eagles, to the northwest of Ireland and western Northern Ireland was the result of a reintroduction project that started in the year 2000. So there are now breeding golden eagles back in Ireland and Northern Ireland. But there's an important distinction to make there between the 2 projects. That was a reintroduction, whereas our project is a reinforcement. So we do have golden eagles in the south of Scotland, but they're in danger. The population is just very low, so we are reinforcing that population. Interestingly, if we sort of flick back, you'll see there in 1920 at the bottom map C there are no golden eagles in the south of Scotland, but there are today. That was one of the theories behind that, was the two world wars. So there was a big shift in land use, and men were away to war, First World War and Second World War, and essentially there wasn't the persecution happening. So golden eagles were able to gain a foothold again, from crossing from other areas where the population was established, but still very sort of stagnant today, unfortunately. The project is a partnership made up of all these different organisations. It sort of represents both sides of the coin, so to speak. So you've got RSPB and Scottish Natural Heritage, now known as Nature Scot. You've also got bodies such as Scottish Land and Estates and Scottish Forestry, representing the sort of land use side of things, and they're funders as well. And sorry, sort of dry slides, but just to give you an idea of where we've come from, it was back in 2008 when concerns were first raised in the south of Scotland. They do every sort of 10 years or so, they do a sort of audit of golden eagles, a survey, which sort of highlighted that the situation wasn't great. It was RSPB and Scottish Land and Estates that initially formed a joint proposal. In July of 2014, there was a study into golden eagles in the south of Scotland, looking at the sort of pressures and food availability and things like that. I'll come on to that in just a second. October 2014, the National Species Reintroduction Forum met and suggested a translocation as the best option. And it was December 2017 that the project launched. And then it wasn't until June 2018 that the first translocation of eagles took place. So you've got 10 years there between there's a problem and we're doing something about it. So these projects just take a lot of time to get all the studies done, all the licenses in place, the funding, the public consultations, all these sorts of things that have to happen for a project to sort of get the go-ahead. And this study that I mentioned, that was published in 2014, it was really important in identifying what pressures there were in the south of Scotland that were restricting golden eagle ranges, to identify what these were and how they could be addressed. And all the information that they gathered, that was sort of modelled and looked into, gave us this figure that the south of Scotland can support between 14 and 16 breeding pairs. So the habitat that's available, the food that's available, these sorts of things suggest that the south of Scotland can support between 14 and 16 breeding pairs of golden eagles, which is an important figure because sometimes people might think we're throwing them out by the busload, which is just not true. We're trying to re-establish the breeding population, support it to ensure it's sustainable into the future. But just to go through some of these challenges that I've identified, that are by no means unique to the south of Scotland and no means unique to golden eagles, but these are some of the reasons why they're struggling a bit, and land use change is certainly one of them. Contrary to some sort of popular belief, it's not wind farm or wind turbine strikes on golden eagles. They tend to be able to avoid them, but therefore the problem is that they're sort of displaced from habitat. So where wind farms are put in sort of the wrong places, it can restrict golden eagle ranges that they might have established in the future. So they would tend not to go to an area where wind farms have been set up. It's again going back to the sort of shyness of the creature. They don't like to be in an area that is with human activity in. And of course, wind farms are sort of, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes in around them and activity with humans sort of managing them. Forestry sort of similar with displacement and sort of human activity. Also, golden eagles tend to favour sort of open ground for hunting and soaring over, not sort of densely packed forest. And then things like other infrastructure, like the pylons at the bottom there. Again, it's the sort of human intrusion into areas favoured by golden eagles, although there can be incidents of electrocution as well, where they bridge between wires, their wings bridge between wires. Recreation is certainly one, and perhaps a growing problem with the boom in tourism in Scotland, and things like North Coast 500, tourism routes, and the desire to explore more of the wild areas and things like that, which is fantastic on one hand, but can cause problems. The image here is interesting. This is out on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. So that's at the north of tip of the Outer Hebrides. There is a golden eagle eyrie on this little craggy cliff bit here. But you'll notice there's a couple of houses here and also a road. So it's thought that in areas where there hasn't been a sort of history of persecution, that golden eagles, whilst I've said on a couple of occasions now how shy they are, but where there isn't that history of persecution, they can sort of encounter a certain level of human activity and not be put off by it, which is interesting. But certainly for the large part, they wouldn't want to be this close to us. You should really qualify these things, recreation, wind, green, clean energy, forestry, really important to the Scottish economy. It's all about a balance, and it's about doing them in the right places at the right time, sort of thing. Persecution is perhaps the issue most talked about, and there's no doubt that it still happens. Eagles are persecuted every year, and there's a lot of work going into improving that. It's also important to look at the picture longer term. If you go back, a century or two, it was a field day. Eagles were shot out of the sky without a thought. But in the last sort of few decades, better protection has come in. In the last few years, you have things like vicarious liability, where it's not just the individual who is prosecuted, but the landowner as well, or the employer. And there's now more things like licensing coming in, and just a huge amount of work trying to root out people who intentionally harm eagles. It's something that our project is approaching as well. We are working with estates, landowners, farmers to try and share with them the work that we're doing, provide information, and just generally try and build bridges between the two, sort of conservation and land management. So there is certainly work to be done. Climate change, very topical, obviously, and certainly could be having an impact. If you look at the two maps on the right hand side of the screen here, you've got mean or sort of average rainfall for April, May and June. The top map 1981 to 1985, and the bottom map 2001 to 2006, and you can just see by the colours there how much wetter it is. So that's a map of the south of Scotland, and you can see the really dark blue areas. That represents the hill ranges where the golden eagle tends to spend its time. So wetter springs means reduced prey availability. For example, a rabbit or a hare might not have as much offspring if it's a really wet spring, so less prey for the golden eagle, then that impacts on the golden eagle's breeding condition and productivity. You also have some extreme weather events like storms or sort of late frosts creeping into spring, leading to chick mortality. Prey availability is one that's often talked about, and it's an interesting one because you sort of have to leave it up to the golden eagle to be able to find an area, a territory where there is prey available. Certainly there are areas of the south of Scotland where the land is a bit barren, other areas not so much. This is one of the 2 or 3 eyries that are active in the south of Scotland, and this photo was taken about 4 or 5 years ago, and you can just see there the amount of prey that's available to that chick. And the chap that took the photo, Tony Lightly, who monitors that nest, this was him going in to put a ring, a tag on that bird to monitor it. He counted 6 portions of hare, 8 of grouse, 4 of grey squirrel, and also 2 of red squirrel. So that chick definitely wasn't going hungry. And then the final challenges for the south of Scotland is recruitment. And by that, we mean the south of Scotland recruiting or attracting golden eagles from other areas in Scotland. The red dots are on this map show satellite tagged golden eagles. So that's one eagle in the south of Scotland and several up there in the Highlands. And you can see none of the eagles up north being drawn out towards the south of Scotland. And the fact is that there are just so few golden eagles in the south of Scotland that there's no reason for another eagle that might pop over here or that might be making its way down south to stay. You know, they're looking for a mate, they're looking for reasons to stay. They're not going to do that if they don't find any other golden eagles. So that's the problem. Over there on the west coast, you've got the Isle of Arran and Kintyre, and we know there are healthy populations out there, and that's nothing for an eagle to cross that little bit of sea into the south of Scotland. But the fact that they're not doing that is reason enough for the project. You know, we want to ensure that eagles that might fly over into the south want to stay here. And there's no better example of that than the last pair in the north of England. I think it was the female that died, and the male in the Cumbria region was for several years after the female died was trying to attract another mate. You know, was building up. The eyrie was performing displays, and they do these amazing swoops and then dives, and they carry up stones and twigs and drop them, then dive down to catch them again. But there was no female around for him to attract, so several years of breeding potential lost, and we no longer have golden eagles in the north of England. So that's the situation that we want to avoid in the south of Scotland. So that sort of sets the scene, if you like, to the project and the work that we do to ensure that golden eagles don't disappear from the south of Scotland. Our aviaries, these buildings here, are up in the Moffat Hills area. We keep them the exact location quite secret, and it's, to be honest, it's so tucked away it would never really be found. But this is where we bring eagles to before we release them. There's a bank of 4. They can share aviaries between 2, and then there's a quarantine aviary on its own just in case. And inside they have a nesting tray. They have various perches on the ground and on the top there. The feeding hatch on the left there, this was just as the aviaries were built, but it has a hood over it. At no point does the eagles see us apart from when they're collected and when they have their satellite tag fitted. You know, they're treated as wild birds. We don't want to risk imprinting them with sort of human interaction. So all the food is done through the hatch, and they don't see us between being collected and having their tag fitted and then being released. So the translocations, which basically just means taking the eagle from one location and moving it to another. These happen across, it's a 5-year project, and it'll happen each summer. Our license from Nature Scot allows us to take up to 10 chicks each year. The chicks are collected between 6 and 8 weeks old. I think when we were looking at that chick development at the start, I was mentioning it needs to be able to, to grip and tear its own food, keep itself warm. So we won't collect a chick under 6 weeks old. And then after 8 weeks old, they're perhaps a bit of a flight risk. We might spook them off the eyrie, off the nest. So we've got this short window when we collect. We also only collect from twin eyries. We will take one chick with us and leave one with the parents. They're kept in our aviaries for approximately 6 weeks. They'll have a satellite tag fitted, and then a few days later they'll be released, and the data from the tag will be monitored. And all this is done with a huge amount of support from so many people and organisations beyond just the core team of there's 5 of us. The raptor study groups who monitor these eyries, who know where they are and where there are twins, work with us, and then the landowners work with us as well to help with access. The image there is of the team off on a collection. It's kept as small as possible. So there's a vet and a vet's assistant. There's John, our eagle officer, with the basket on his back there. And then there's a climber as well who helps with access into the eyries. And you'll see here one of the eyries that we go into. The chicks tend to be very docile at this age. They don't put up a fight, or they're not struggling or anything like that. The parents will keep an eye from a distance away. We know from previous projects such as the Irish golden eagle reintroduction and other projects across the world that have done similar things, that the adult won't abandon the nest from the activity, from us going into it to assess the chicks and take one. And we know from all the eyries that we've collected from that the remaining chick has gone on to fledge afterwards. So the vet makes an assessment of the birds. They are checked over for their physical features such as their beak and their talons and things like that. He'll listen to their breathing. They'll take a blood sample as well, and then they're put into these carry boxes, into a ventilated vehicle on a memory foam mattress, so it's all nice and comfortable. And then they're taken straight away down to south of Scotland to our aviaries, and this is them arriving with one of the chicks in 2018. So they'll take the birds straight in, and put them on the nest tray, and then just leave them to it. So in 2018 we collected it was 3 eagles, so we can take up to 10. But of course, it's dependent on how successful our year it is for twins, because we've only collect from twin eyries, and so we have to find eyries that have twins between that 6 and 8 week-old window, and then we'll take one of them. So they're given the tags that they have fitted on their legs have identification numbers, so C09 and C11, and depending on who you speak to, if it's someone on the scientific side of the project, that's what they'll be known as. If you speak to someone like me, they'll be known as Edward or Beaky or whatever name we've given them. We work with local primary schools and volunteers and other groups to come up with the names. So in 2018, we collected a male and 2 females. This was Emily, the other female in the image that I showed you earlier on. And then in 2019, it wasn't a great year for twins, so we only got 3. It was 3 males here, B29, C17, and C19. Unfortunately, we had a bit of an incident in 2019 that meant that only one of the males survived. So the whole collection process, the translocation, their time in the aviaries, their release, all went to plan perfectly. They also were able to find the feeding stations that we put out for them after the release, and I'll show you a bit of that later on. But what happened was one of the females released in 2018 returned to the release site. She was about 10 miles away, but obviously eagles being high up, good eyesight, was able to notice some activity. So we can see from the satellite data, made a beeline straight back to the release area. And she killed 2 of the males, unfortunately. We were able to find one of them, and the post-mortem identified the injuries concurrent with an attack from another eagle. We think that this behaviour was because she returned to the release area and found that the feeding stations were full of food and perhaps wanted to protect that food for herself. This sort of behaviour is unprecedented with young golden eagles. They're not territorial at that age. They haven't sort of established a territory. So we think that she was trying to protect that food for herself. So one male was found, another male wasn't found. We're pretty confident that that's the same thing happened to him. His satellite tag must have been broken in the attack, and unfortunately we weren't able to find him. And then the third male was collected, something we never want to do, because after the release they're wild birds. But it was, in his best interest that he was collected and released from another location. So this was C17, named Scan, which has a sort of loose translation, Native American translation to Spirit of the Sky. So he was collected and re-released from another area. So the decision was made for future releases to happen in a different site, in case the same thing were to happen again. So very disappointing, obviously from our point of view, but that's sort of these things can happen. Obviously, last year translocations didn't happen due to the pandemic. We weren't able to carry out field work and have people meeting and traveling. So it has happened this year. We have collected eagles, so we'll be able to share on our website soon how that's gone. But everything has been going well so far. So I've now got a few small clips from inside our aviaries. So this is 2018. The male and female here, Beaky and Edward. So that's Beaky in the foreground, and they're just preening each other here. So quite affectionate behaviour being shown. We've never witnessed any sort of animosity inside the aviaries. They have plenty of food, and we also sort of wonder whether they consider each other a sibling being collected from twin nests, twin eyries. Whether they consider this this bird a sibling or not, we're not sure. And you can see here Edward at the back, in the background there. So this is the sort of behaviour we're looking for when John's monitoring the aviaries. So he's just practising his hunting skills here. He's not quite got his balance yet, but that's the sort of stuff that we want to see. And this is Emily again in 2018 feeding. So they're fed with a variety of food in the aviaries. We want to try and key them into the types of things they'll find in the wild. So they'll get things like portions of rabbit and hare, grey squirrels. We have food donated to the project from estates and things like that. So they might get portions of fox and deer as well. But it's important they have that range of food that they'd find in the wild. And this is them. I don't think this is CO9 Edward here, the male. He's not got his satellite tag fitted yet, but this is not long before release. And this is the sort of behaviour we'll see at that point. They'll be out on the perches, wing beating there, sort of building up the muscles, and starting to become a bit more active, before they would sort of naturally fledge. And this is Beaky C11 on the floors of the aviaries. So it wouldn't be in the wild that they would just launch themselves off the eyrie. They'd start to sort of scramble about a bit as far as they could. They're sort of building up to it. So again, this is the sort of behaviour we also see in our aviaries. The images are filmed through tiny little spy holes, so they don't know that we're there. We keep as quiet as possible. So just a few days before they're released, they have their satellite tag fitted. This is when the bird is fully grown, so it doesn't affect their, they're not going to grow anymore, so it doesn't affect their movement or their flight. The tags are fitted by licensed handlers. And the tags, they weigh about 70 grams, so it's sort of equivalent to a chocolate bar or something like that. And they have these Teflon straps that go over the front, and the straps are stitched together at the front. So it's almost like a little rucksack or something like that. The solar panel recharges the battery. The batteries being sort of modern technology, we expect they could last the lifespan of the bird, so 20 plus years maybe. The data we get from these tags allows us to obviously monitor their behaviour, where they're going, study that. It also allows us to engage with areas where the birds are going. So we might see that they're frequently visiting certain areas. We can go then and speak to landowners. It was, as I was mentioning earlier on, with the work that we try to do with landowners to engage them with the project. We're not maybe specifically identifying the exact locations of the bird, but we're telling them about the project, that they might see eagles in the area, why we're doing it. So it's all about sort of building bridges, if you like. And then after they've had their tags fitted, a few days later, the hatches are dropped and the eagles are released. So this is the big moment, if you like. This is Edward, CO9, and his release. So I'll start the video there. The BBC came to fit a little camera whilst he was having his satellite tag put on. So they went around the front of the aviaries and put this camera in place. And I think they were expecting it might be quite dramatic footage, that the eagle would just, launch off, and it would be really impressive. But as I was saying, they're really cautious birds. They're taking in their surroundings. They're not in a rush. So you can see here, Edward just looking around. And unfortunately, with the camera, it was set to record minute bursts, and then it would stop, and then it would be reactivated again. And unfortunately, in that gap, Edward decided to take his flight. But fortunately, we were up in the hills, or John was up in the hills about a good half a mile away with a good camera and telescope. So you can see the BBC camera just against the wall there, and you might be able to see Edward's head just there. So it's a bit shaky, but shows his moment. You can see there the white patches of a young eagle, a juvenile eagle. A little bit of a clumsy landing. They can fly when they come off the nest, but they're not sort of practiced enough. They take a wee while before they're taking big flights. But he was fine. He was up on the wall, then up on the top of the aviaries and exploring and, building up to it. And this was Emily, 121's first flight. She landed, you can just see her there in the heather. And we could see this coming a mile off. You've got this sheep track there. And then this ewe with 2 lambs comes along. So it's a bit of a first encounter, really. But this ewe wasn't really for budging, and it was Emily that got out of the way. Sort of beached herself in the heather there, but she was fine. But I just thought it was amazing that this, golden eagle, top of the food chain, apex predator, and this ewe comes along and just shoves her out of the way, and just gets on with its day, munching on a bit of heather. So I mentioned we have these feeding stations. So this is sort of replicating the food drops that would be provided by the parents from a naturally fledged eagle. So these are close by to the aviaries, and the eagles find them pretty quickly. But it's really critical that they have this food in the early stages. They're not, sort of practiced enough to go and catch something straight away. Or find some carrion, so this gives them that boost in the lead up to winter. But it's interesting, some people ask, will they ever move on if that food's available to them? But they do. They've got a natural sort of instinct to want to get out and explore. So it was both Emily and Edward had moved on from the release area by October, and then Beaky had moved on by, I think it was February the following year. And this video is, as I mentioned at the beginning, a great comparison for golden eagles and buzzards. You might just see the top of the eagle's head in the grass next to the heather there. And there's some buzzards, a couple of buzzards that are harassing. I think this is Beaky, so they're harassing her. So up close, you can really see the difference in size. So since their release, we obviously monitor the data from the satellite tags. John will now and again take trips out to sort of catch up with the areas that they're in and see how they're getting on. This collage here was some shots he got of Beaky and also Scan, who was released in 2019, displaying quite interesting behaviour. This sort of parallel flying, wing touching, talon locking, which is sometimes behaviour that can be associated with pairing up and mating. They're a bit too young, certainly Scan too young, so just sort of playing, practicing. But interesting behaviour all the same to observe. But as I said, they explore large areas. So we've seen them go from pretty much the east coast of the south of Scotland all the way over to the west coast. They're visiting former eagle territories, assessing or mapping the area, if you like, and seeing where they might want to settle. They've also made incursions into the north of England, and Beaky in 2019 made a trip down to the North Pennines, where she spent a week and then came back again. So we never know, they might want to sort of settle in the north of England. So we'll see. It'll sort of be over the next year or two that we might see those birds from 2018 looking to settle. Just a few more slides left, and just to touch on the public engagement work that we do, which is a big part of the project. Obviously, the core conservation work is the focus, but work to try and engage people in the south of Scotland is also really important. I think most people don't really consider the golden eagle to be a species in its native range in the south of Scotland. You know, they're up there in the Highlands with wildcats and pine martens and other things, even though there are pine martens in the south of Scotland. But we're just trying to reinvigorate that passion for golden eagles in the south of Scotland, that understanding, sort of try and get people interested and educated about the project. So we'll do various talks and events. We work with school children. We have an Eagle Schools program that is quite flexible, but can be everything from ecology to art to English to drama or anything in between. Really, we work with the schools to do a program with them. We work with volunteers who help us out at events and with educational things. We also have a partnership with John Muir Trust at the Glen Lude Estate, which is in the south of Scotland, where we go up. It's a sort of upland habitat where we'll do various conservation tasks. So it's nice to be able to get some hands-on work done with volunteers, because unfortunately we can't really involve volunteers with the eagles and the aviaries themselves. The project is also sort of tasked with trying to find out how we can benefit the wider economy. So other or similar projects like the Red Kite reintroduction, they have the Kite Trail in Galloway, which has thousands of visitors annually. The Mull Eagle Watch attracts over 1.5 million in tourism expenditure. The North Harris Eagle Observatory has 10,000 visitors each year. And then, we're working with the Golden Eagle, which is such an attractive prospect. So we need to be careful how we do this. We can't really put up hides or things like that, or bring people to the eagles. But what we can do are things like this. So we have a small exhibition where we've worked with a local estate, Philip Hoch, just outside Selkirk, where they've provided us with some space and some funding. We've also put in some funding, as have Raptor study groups and RSPB, to put in this small exhibition all about the project, all about the history of eagles in the south of Scotland, various things to look at, and children's games and videos and things like that. We also have our Eagles Towns. The first one in Moffat is September, where we have a sort of week-long festival of talks and activities and events and various things going on. If anyone's interested in that, or think they might be up this way in September, then if you go to our website, you'll find out more about it. So that's it from me. But just to finish on this quote, mankind needs golden eagles, although you would not think it from the way we have persecuted them. We need them to marvel at the spread of their wings, the soaring icons of wildness that make our hills and glens so special. We need them to teach respect for wildness to our children. We need them to restore our bruised spirits when life gets tough. And above all, we need them to remind us that we are a part of nature, not apart from it. So thank you very much. And if anyone's got any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and answer them.
Okay, I'm hoping we've got some questions now. Michelle, can I pass over to you?
Someone's asking here, isn't Moffat well known for persecution by game keepers, not just raptors, but badgers too?
Is Moffat well known for persecution? Not as far as I'm aware. I don't know of persecution incidents in the Moffat area. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what else to add to that. I mean, we try to work very closely with various estates and landowners in regards to the project. We've been very supportive over the last few years. So it's not a particular concern to us that we've released eagles in these areas. I think we've had quite a good support from the Moffat community and being so close to the release areas.
Okay, and then the question, is there any clash between the eagle population and the reintroduction of kites, E and G?
Sorry, you might have to have a clash between, I missed the last part of that.
Is there any clash between the eagle population and the reintroduction of red kite, D and G?
The red kite population. No, not that we're aware of. Certainly, there will be interactions between golden eagles and other raptors as they move across the south of Scotland and certain areas. But that's just that's the balance of the ecosystem. We've lost a lot of our apex predators. So this is a sort of way of trying to restore a little bit of that balance. So it's certainly not anything of a concern. Red kites are doing really well. There might be interactions between golden eagles and other raptors, but nothing that would be of concern.
Okay, and people are asking how they can help with your project.
if you go to our website, you can certainly find out more about what we do. You can donate to us on that to help with the costs of the project ongoing, and certainly the legacy phase where there'll need to be ongoing monitoring of the birds. You can get in touch with us on the website, and certainly if you ever venture up north, then you can visit the exhibition, you can attend events and things like that. So our website, you can also sign up to our newsletter to get monthly updates on the work that we're doing. So that's a good way of sort of following our progress.
Brilliant. We'll definitely make sure everybody's got the details of that when we follow this up for you. Another question here. You're talking about the twin chicks and one dispatching the smaller one. A question here: do they eat the other chick, or do they just literally push it out of the nest?
I think they can. They might well eat the chick if there's if that's the food available to them at that time. I don't think they tend to push them out as much as just sort of dominate them, peck them, and weaken them so they might die. It's not that that chick might be pushed out, the parents might push it out. There's not one way or the other really, but it's not so much for food as it is just competition. It's just survival of the fittest really, and so quite common in other species as well.
Yeah, sure. Do eagles have a heightened sense of smell to find their food, or is it just mainly eyesight that they're using?
Yeah, eyesight, not anything that I've come across in terms of their other senses, their smell or hearing or something like that. But yeah, eyesight is the one. They have extraordinary vision, able to pick up their prey, so over 3 kilometers away, and adjust that vision as they're coming in to catch something. It's quite phenomenal, really.
Okay, and there's 2 questions here that kind of tie in together, really. Is there a particular reason why the eagle population declined so dramatically in Ireland after 1920? And someone else asking, why have they become extinct in England and Wales? And are there any plans to introduce them to the north of England?
I think certainly historically it's persecution. Eagles were shot and poisoned. They were seen as, competition for game birds. There's no getting away from that. Perhaps more modern problems are surrounding or with land use. But historically it would have been persecution. There was no protection for birds of prey, for eagles. Prior to the sort of, I think it was 60s that the first sort of legislation came in. So it was sort of up to the landowner really, and all raptors were seen as vermin. They were on that level, so they were heavily persecuted. In terms of other reintroductions, not in the north of England that I know of. It's hopefully with the success of our project, we will hopefully see golden eagles moving back into suitable areas in the north of England. I think there is a project that is in the sort of very early stages in Wales that they're trying to get off the ground, reintroducing golden eagles to Wales. There's white-tailed eagle projects underway on the Isle of Wight, and also I think there's talk of one over in East Anglia as well. So it's a more positive picture, I'd say, in terms of trying to encourage populations in areas where they've historically native to.
Right, and there's one for you personally, actually. How did you become interested in golden eagles, and how did you come to work on the project?
I should say I don't have a background with raptors as such. I do with conservation. I studied environmental sciences at college and then university. I first worked as a ranger in the Scottish Borders, and then I worked with the Woodland Trust down in the southeast of England on their sites in Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Berkshire. But all my work's usually been working with people and wildlife and nature and things. So this role, working with communities and stakeholders and things like that, was a sort of natural progression of work that I've previously done. And it's always fascinating to come onto a project where it's quite niche. You're working with a particular species, and you get up to speed very quickly. I work with some really knowledgeable people, and then of course it's a partnership, so you get the benefit of all these different organizations and the work that they do and the resources that they have. So it's fascinating. It really is.
That's brilliant. Well, we've got no more questions, unless anybody has some last minute ones.
Yes, I've got a question, Philip. Have you got any tips on how, I find it fascinating, all these organisations working together, talking to landowners, talking to farmers. I love how you've got the primary schools to name the birds. So any tips on how you, I mean, it's obviously taken a lot of work to get to this. Any tips you can give us? That's something that our group, we really try to do this a lot. It's something that's very important to us as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's really just putting the project out there, and I don't think there's anything specific. I mean, in terms of successes, there's been an equal number of knockbacks, of trying to work with certain groups and it not getting off the ground. We just take on every opportunity that comes to us. We even did there's a prison in Dumfries where they have sort of family days each year to try and encourage better relations between inmates and families. So we went along there and presented the project to them. So we'll take any opportunity, particularly to get the project across to people who might not otherwise engage with it. I think it's quite easy sometimes. I could interact with wildlife groups in the south of Scotland all year round, but we try to reach out to groups who might otherwise not be interested in it or get the opportunity to be interested in it. For example, learning disability groups or unemployed young people, things like that. So I think searching out, certain groups and just making that approach. We're lucky that we also have on our staff, we have a retired gamekeeper who's been a head keeper and keeper all across the UK, and who's passionate about golden eagles and about conservation. And he gives us that in with landowners and land managers, farmers, or whoever. He sort of speaks their language. He can get us in there and make that introduction. So it's often really helpful in sort of establishing some dialogue. And I think also just being patient and just being aware that not everyone has the same opinion, trying to find some common ground and persevering. But as I say, sometimes, you butt up against it and people don't always appreciate these things, or, so you just have to take the wins where you can get them. But something that I missed out is that in the last 3 years, we've reached over 10,000 people so far, through various different programs and projects. So we're certainly getting through the different communities in the south of Scotland. So it's but it is hard, and it does take a lot of work. But there's two of me. There's another chap who does the community outreach work as well. So when you can get the funding to do that sort of thing, it helps.
Just unmute it. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. Fantastic advice, and I've got a lot from that. Well, I think that's the end. I just want to thank you so much, Philip, for joining us. I really, really got so much from that. Absolutely brilliant. I've learned so much about golden eagles, so many things I didn't know about the grip. I think I'm going to remember that. I've written so much down. I didn't actually realise that they weren't adults till 3 to 5 years old. So that for me is amazing. The way you go to great lengths to stop the human imprint on these wonderful birds, I find incredible. The little spy holes you were using for the cameras, just absolutely brilliant. And as I say, all the community work that you do, I've really taken a lot from that. It's really helpful, actually. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I will be keeping a very close eye on your project.
Great, thank you.
I might make it up that way sometime.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you very much for having me, and a pleasure to speak to you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you. I think that a few people have put messages on. Just have a look for it to say thank you. So just have a look at those before we go. I don't want you to miss out.
Oh, I've got them up, yeah. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye now. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.